The habits that you have today and the results that you have today are going to continue to compound, and they're not going to compound in the way that you want them to. They're going to compound in a negative way. Compounding is real both ways, guys and girls. It works for us and it works against us. My name is Brian Pizzo. I help successful professionals build an elite body and mind without sacrificing work or time with their family. I know your life because I lived it for 20 years. Welcome back to the show. This is the Success Lift Podcast, and I'm your host, Brian. Thank you for being back with me. Welcome to November. We got 2 more months of the year left at the time of this recording dropping. I think it's November 3rd of 2025. We had Halloween last week. How'd you do? How'd you do during the Halloween week? This is probably the most critical week for you, as everyone brings their excess Halloween candy into the office and you just find yourself not being able to control your ability to eat 6 or 7 Kit Kats, or not eat them, I guess is the right way to phrase it, at 9:45 a.m. on a Tuesday. And you come home feeling all sorts of bad about yourself. And since you already ate 5 or 6 or 7 pieces at work, you end up having a little bit more of your kids. And all of a sudden, 2 or 3 weeks from now, we head into Thanksgiving. And then you just say completely F it. And the entire rest of the 2 months of the year is gone. And you find yourself doing a cleanse and dry January in the beginning of January. And how's that going for you? Now, hopefully that's not you. Hopefully you've been listening to me for a while here. 280 plus episodes. I think this is 284 this week. And if you have been with me for a number of weeks or years, thank you. And if you haven't, welcome. But I hope you're going to learn a few different ways to get a little bit more productive with your life, get a little bit smarter and more efficient with your life. I think one of the things that we do with executives inside of corporate America is teach them a better way. And I say better, I just put the 2 fingers up, or the 4 fingers up for the air quotes in parentheses for everybody on audio, a more efficient way to live. Ultimately, I would argue a better way, a way that you can feel like you are creating the energy and the balance that you're looking for inside of your life. I was recently back in New York and New Jersey meeting with clients about a week or so ago. And I talked to one of the teams that we were finishing up our work with at People Inc. Think like People, the magazine. And team of amazing professionals, very, very high performing people. They are mostly husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, trying to balance an extraordinary amount of obligations on their plate on a weekly basis outside of the office while still performing at a high level in. And we talked about this notion of creating that energy, creating that balance. That was kind of my mandate. My mandate was brought to me by the management team to come in and help them be more productive employees, be better producers, obviously create some balance in their life, because many of them felt pulled in multiple directions, just like I'm sure you do. And the one thing I really harped on throughout the program and reiterated in our last meeting was that I believe that too many executives wait for these moments to come. They wait for conditions to improve, and we need to be actively creating balance in our lives. Now, that doesn't mean that you just go take a 2-week vacation every 6 weeks so that you can recharge. That means you develop strategies and habits and structure and routines into your days and your weeks so that you are feeling like you're filling all the cups up in the different pillars of your life. The 3 pillars of my program are mental, physical, and relational. And so we need to make sure each week that we're scheduling things and doing actions, taking actions proactively in order to create the energy that we need, in order to create the balance, because just like no one is coming to save you that famous personal development quote that we've probably heard throughout the course of the last several years. No one is coming to help create balance in your work-home life. You must take control of it and create it for yourself. And that's something that I find many professionals miss the mark on. We wait for those 2 weeks around Christmas and into New Year's. We wait for August break or July holidays or our 2-weeker or these moments of the year where we do have a little bit of time to disconnect when work slows down for a period of time. I don't need to tell you that work speeds right back up very quickly. And if you are only implementing some of these strategies when the conditions are perfect, you are by definition setting yourself up to fail, because as soon as conditions become imperfect, which is like maybe an hour from now, you are more likely to abandon the protocols that you've put into place. And this wait and create thought process resonated a lot with me, and it's resonated with other clients that I've had. And I wanted to riff on that a little bit and talk about a few other things in this week's episode. And I'm going to keep it short. And every time I say that, I don't actually keep it short, but I'm going to do my best. The notion that people are waiting for these perfect moments, I think stems from oftentimes not exactly knowing and being clear about what it is that they want. What does another life actually look like for them? They know that the life that they're in right now is not optimal. They know that they wouldn't recreate it if they had their choice. If you laid it out to them and say, let's go 20 years back, and you can script out what your perfect set of results are. Some people honestly would have trouble doing that. And now that seems a little strange to me, because I think I'm much more clear than the average person about what it is that I want. I've now had this conversation dozens and dozens and dozens of times over the last couple years running our corporate program and speaking to one-on-one clients and speaking to prospective clients and just talking about mental performance, balance, work-life, structure, back and forth. This is like what people ask me about at the cocktail party, at the dinner party, on the weekends, at the kids' sports games. How do I do this? I've now heard it enough to realize that it's not that abnormal for somebody to not be crystal clear on what it is that they want. They're way more clear on what it is that they don't want and what it is that they would love to omit and remove from their life. And so when you're not relying upon this desirable set of outcomes that has you able to reverse engineer the turn-by-turn directions, sometimes we don't exactly know where to go, because we don't know if we should go left at this road or right at this road or continue straight. And it's not always clear. The ditch or the cliff that you're going to fall off of is not right away. It may be miles and miles and miles down the road. And even more confusing, the first several miles of that road might actually look pretty similar to the other paths that you can take. And people can get confused. And that confusion can result in some complacency, because their life is not necessarily burning down to the ground, but they know that there's more out there for them, that they're capable of more. And so the easiest thing to do is to wait and to do nothing. You're not 50 pounds overweight, but you probably should lose 15 to 20. You're not aggressively addicted to drugs, alcohol, gambling, pornography, and other vices, but you haven't gone a week without doing most of those at a low grade basis in over 5 years. There's all these things that are not 5-alarm fire bells in our lives that we tolerate and we allow to fester. And we do that because it takes energy and effort and attention and consistency in order to permanently change these things. And if I'm not quite sure what's at the finish line for me, I'm going to be less willing to pick it up and to try to take the ball there. So one thing that's worked for me in my life is not necessarily focusing on the end result and the desirable outcome, but focusing on getting the hell out of where I am right now for fear, which is the key word, for fear of ultimately having an adverse response. And so what do I mean by an adverse response? I mean, let me just give you personal examples because, again, I ain't kidding when I said I lived your life. I lived your life for 20 years. I know exactly what you're going through. That is, time after time after time, the thing that I hear most from clients and people who are actively paying attention to my world, my content, things like that. I feel like you've lived my life. I know that you've lived my life. You know what it's like to be me. I hear it over and over and over again. And so I'll just take you back to things that I was fearful of, especially if they continued down the path that they were going down. I was fearful that my body was going to break down to a point where I was not able to play golf much anymore. I had gone from being very incredibly fit in my 20s to pretty out of shape, but not like visibly out of shape, not like 70 pounds overweight. Like I was probably, 10 pounds heavier than I am right now, walking around lean and mean at 6'6", 226 to 28 pounds. I was probably 237, 239. If I crossed 240, I knew that meant I needed to go on, a crash diet for 2 or 3 days, not eat any carbs, avoid alcohol for the next 4 days, get my scale down to just eventually do it all again, the other way, back up. And so I knew that I wasn't obese, but I also knew that I wasn't in good shape. And what I really knew is that I couldn't play around at golf without eating a bunch of Advil, drinking a couple vodkas, and putting 2 bags of ice on my knees when I was done walking the golf course. And so very regularly in the Men's Grill at Knickerbocker Country Club, you could find me post-round, having a drink, which is probably my 6th of the day, having a drink with my friends, grabbing an extra chair, bringing a chair over, going into the back kitchen, grabbing the ice machine, bringing a couple shoe bags because, just have like regular plastic bags at the club. So I'd go get 2 shoe bags from the locker room attendant. I would fill them up, I'd tie them up, and I'd put them on my knees, and I'd put both my feet up onto a chair. I could not play around a golf without that. I couldn't bend down properly to read a putt. I struggled out there. I regularly was limping for the last 3, 4, 5, 7 holes, depending on how bad it was on a particular day. I would commute to Manhattan. I would get out of the car after my 45 to 60 minute ride. I would limp for several steps getting out of the car. My back would get tight very quickly. I did not feel good sitting at my desk most of the day. These are all things that I was experiencing real time. I was able to convince myself that if I stayed on this path, my body would effectively be unable to do some of the things that I enjoyed doing. I had 2 young kids at the time. I had a 5-year-old. I had a newborn. I could project out several years when my son, 6, 7, 8 years later at 12, 13, my daughter running around as a 3 or a 4-year-old or a 5 or a 6-year-old, I wasn't going to be able to keep up with them, certainly at the level that I wanted to. And so I used fear as a motivator in that moment to do something about my body being physically broken down. I didn't think that my marriage was that bad. I thought I had your prototypical marriage that had just passed through the honeymoon phase, and we were destined to sort of be in this business as usual relationship, raising kids, being, co-parenters inside of a house, quasi-roommates. Yeah, if we both have a few glasses of wine or some drinks, I get lucky. There's the obligatory, couple of days a month, and it all kind of averages out to once a week, maybe twice if I'm lucky. And everything is, just the way it's supposed to be as a married guy with a young family and a big career. And I thought my marriage was just pretty good. It was pretty good, if you asked me. Way better than others. And the ones who had better ones probably had some set of circumstances that I told myself I couldn't have. And so I wasn't motivated to go after anything better because I didn't quite know what greatness in a marriage looked like. I didn't have that as a role model in my life. I didn't have coaching around me. I didn't have a community of people where I could point to a marriage that was like, damn, that is something that I want. And that's no disrespect to my friends or the people that I hung out with. All amazing people and had good marriages, but nobody had a great marriage. Nobody had an elite marriage. Nobody was doing things that I could look at and go, shit, I'm not doing that. That's a benchmark that I need to improve myself on. And so since I lacked the motivation to push and move the ball down the field in my marriage, I found myself complacent. And one day that complacency hit me right in the face with a fist. And it's a figurative fist. My wife didn't actually punch me in the face, but she did figuratively punch me in the face when she said that she wasn't quite sure whether or not she wanted to continue to live the life that we've been living for the last 8 to 9 years or so as a couple, and certainly the last 5+ years married with kids. And that was something that I was extremely fearful of. I was afraid to be a single dad. I was afraid to split time with my wife, my kids. I was afraid to lose half my net worth. All of these things drove me to take immediate action. That immediate action created a result. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the result that I was looking for. And so oftentimes, if you are not worried enough about, or clear enough, let me rephrase. If you're not clear enough about where it is you want to go, I would ask you to look at what is the set of circumstances that you currently have. And if you stay on this path, what is the likely outcome? And even if you're not fearful of it today, could you pro forma, as we would call it in the financial world, out a scenario that does not look very good for you? If you are in your early or mid or even late 40s and you have constant pain in your body, if you are more than 20 pounds overweight, if you haven't touched a weight and are just now skinny fat but not actually 20 pounds overweight, but if we looked at you, your body fat percentage would be in the high 20s because you have no goddamn muscle, you're just walking around like a wet noodle with a gut. What does that look like for you in 10, 15, 20 years? Play that out, because the habits that you have today and the results that you have today are going to continue to compound, and they're not going to compound in the way that you want them to. They're going to compound in a negative way. Compounding is real both ways, guys and girls. It works for us and it works against us. And you can lay out a very plausible scenario that your knee pain and back pain and your ability to get to the gym and you getting injured once or twice every 2 to 3 months, and you not necessarily caring about what it is you put in your body because, hey, my wife, she's married, she loves me anyway. And what do I need to do that for? Like, I'm not trying to impress anybody else. Well, you may be trying to impress somebody else in 15 years when your wife decides to leave you and you have to go find another spouse or a girlfriend. You may be more inclined to do these things when you realize that, like, you're at the point where you actually can't even play a round of golf and walk the golf course. You have to take a cart. Or your shoulder gets bad enough that it just hurts too much to swing, and so you shut it down for 6 months or the rest of the season. These things will compound. And the problem that people have with compounding negative results is that they don't realize that they compound. There's a phenomenon that we use with kids, it's a very good predictor of success in life, by the way. It's this phenomenon of delayed gratification. And, can you delay your gratification today for results 2 days from now, 4 days from now, 2 years from now, 4 years from now? But gratification is not the only thing that compounds. Consequences compound. I heard a good friend of mine, phenomenal basketball coach, the best youth basketball coach in the business, my ex-teammate and good friend Billy Armstrong, head coach at Bergen Catholic basketball program in Oradell, New Jersey, talking to a group of kids recently. And he was using this analogy of delayed consequences. and I've heard this before. Billy didn't make this up. He's amazing at what he does, but all of us coaches, we're just saying the same shit. We recycle it and we filter it and deliver it through a lens that hopefully our intended audience, his intended audience was a group of young kids. Mine is a successful professional whose life has cost them, their professional life has cost them aspects of their personal life. And so when you do some of these things, when you sit around all day, when you eat like shit, when you drink too much, when you don't take your wife proactively out on dates, when you're not treating her like it's the honeymoon phase when you were dating, when you're not just doing things just because, by the way, it was never just because you wanted to get laid. When you're doing things just because in your relationship, when you're taking the extra steps in order to do whatever it is that you need to do, you get results over the course of time. But when you don't do them, you don't get immediate feedback. So I think Billy's analogy was like if you walk, and I've heard this before, if you walked into McDonald's and you ordered a Big Mac and, the value menu, and 2 days later you were diagnosed with chronic disease, that would be an immediate feedback loop. If you smoked a cigarette and within an hour you were diagnosed with lung cancer, that would be an immediate feedback loop. The amount of people who would continue to exhibit the behavior of that get those results would be dramatically reduced. Dramatically. But you don't. It takes decades to develop lung cancer. It takes decades to develop chronic disease. It takes a decade for your marriage to slowly but surely chip away. It takes a long time for the consequences of your actions to come to fruition. And because you don't have the feedback loop, it's a lot easier to say, fuck it. It's a lot easier to go into the pantry and eat all the things you're not supposed to at 10 p.m. at night when you put your head in the sand and you don't do anything about it and you pick it up 3 months later and you're up 7 pounds and then you feel like shit. If you immediately got feedback, like you visually saw the belly fat of what 7 more pounds looks like, if you visually saw it right away, you wouldn't do it as fast. You wouldn't do it as much. And so people don't have consequences that are immediate, they are delayed. And I need you to understand that you still have consequences. The negative effects are continuing to compound. My hope is that you get a little bit afraid of those. Fear, anger, disapproval, dissatisfaction, these can all motivate people. In the long term, I would love to see people motivated by positivity and forward-looking goals. There are moving towards goals and pleasure. There is also moving away from pain. When my wife told me that she wasn't so sure that she wanted to continue her marriage with me, I was moving as far away from pain as I possibly could. I had no idea what I was doing. I did not know what the goal was, except for one: no divorce. And so I was motivated by a negative outcome, by a fearful set of circumstances that I had. Now, I needed to transfer that to something more positive at some point in the future, but not until I got far enough away from that fearful outcome. And so it's okay for you to take fear, take negativity, and turn it into a positive for yourself. If that's what's motivating you right now, do it. If you are in pain on a daily basis, I want you to think about that pain constantly. It's not going to feel good. Think about it. Where is it affecting your life? How annoying is it? How much does it bother you when you have to sit there and put ice on your knees, or you're laid up and you can't go to the gym because of your back for a week, or you limp out of the chair, or everything that you do hurts because it's back pain, and back pain is debilitating for people. I know this because I have it, and I've had it much worse than I do now. Tap into that fear. What if you keep going at this pace? Where will you be? You may be 42, only 30 pounds overweight, feel a little bit banged up, but what if we put you on the same path and add 8 years and you're 50? And now the negative effects have compounded even further. Where are you at then? Does that sound like a rosy picture we're painting? Does that get you a little bit fearful? Does that turn maybe into motivation? That motivation then pushes you to do some things. And so fear can be a good motivator for a temporary period of time. Fear can drive action. Action is what creates some micro results. Micro results create confidence, and they also create momentum for people because they come back to a process. They feel good about themselves. When you have momentum and confidence, you keep doing what you've been doing. When you keep doing what you've been doing, you continue to get the result. And isn't that a great way to live? And so ironically, the thing that you couldn't motivate yourself to do, which is maybe be consistent, have discipline. But what if you just scared the shit out of yourself into having discipline? You would then, at some point in the near future, be actually motivated by the discipline that you've experienced and that you've shown. And you'll use that as an anchor for yourself so that when you don't want to do it, you still get up and you do it because you have too much evidence to support that what you do creates the results that you want. And that's the cycle that not enough people get into. And one hack to get into it is fear. And so if you're not sure what you want with your life, if you feel like your life is pretty good, if you can't get motivated, pro forma out, extrapolate out some fear in your life. If you keep doing what you're doing, where will you be in 10 years? What will your life look like? Will the people that you have in it right now still be there? Will your wife still be there? Will your kids feel the same way about you because maybe they'll be teenagers by then and they'll actually know what it is you do and you don't do? This is a great tool. It's one that's worked for me really well. It's not like a core part of how I coach people because it's a feedback loop that you can kind of get a little bit, you can get off the wheels with a little bit because you want to predominantly keep your mindset positive and focus on positive actions. But every once in a while, man, we got to get afraid. We got to take action because we don't want the scary result to happen. I don't want it for me. I don't want it for you. If this message helped you, please tell somebody about it. I hope you have a fantastic week. I'll see you back here next week.